First night alone. No big deal, right? I was 17 and my parents were out of town for the weekend. I had the whole house to myself. Just me, my phone, and a stocked fridge. Freedom. I double-checked the locks before heading upstairs. Not that I was paranoid, but our house was old, the kind that groaned when the wind hit just right. Tonight, the wind was restless, slipping through the trees in the backyard. I tried to ignore it. Curled up in bed, I scrolled mindlessly, the glow of my screen the only light in the room. That's when I heard it. Something outside, soft, barely there. I turned the volume down, listened. Wind. Then another sound. A shuffle, not the trees, something deliberate. I sat up, my chest tightening. My window faced the backyard, and we didn't have neighbors close enough for anyone to just wander through. Slowly, I slid out of bed and crept toward the blinds. Just a quick check, just to put my mind at ease. I pulled the slats apart and peered outside. At first, nothing, just the dark, the stretch of overgrown grass swaying under the porch light. Then, movement. Near the back fence, a man, tall, dressed in dark clothes, standing completely still. My stomach knotted. My first thought was that it was some drunk who got lost. But he wasn't moving like someone disoriented. He wasn't moving at all. He was just standing there. And then suddenly he turned his head fast, too fast, right toward me. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Even from here I could see it. He was smiling. The lights flickered, and just like that, he was gone. I staggered back from the window, heart hammering. My phone was still in my hand, my fingers twitching to dial 911 and 11. But what would I even say? There was a man in my backyard, and now he's gone? No broken-in fence, no forced entry, just gone. I shook my head, trying to steady my breathing. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was a shadow, a trick of the wind. But that smile... No way I was making that up. I moved through the house carefully, double-checking every lock, even though I knew I had locked everything earlier. Front door, deadbolt secured. Windows, shut tight. Back door, my stomach dropped. The back door was unlocked. I swore under my breath and locked it immediately, twisting the knob to make sure it held. My hands were clammy, the metal cold against my palm. Had I forgotten? I never forgot. My ears strained for any noise. The wind outside howled through the trees, but inside the house was silent, too silent, like something was holding its breath. I turned off all the lights downstairs, trying to make myself invisible, then grabbed the nearest thing that could be used as a weapon, my dad's old baseball bat. It wasn't much, but it was something. I crept back upstairs, keeping my back against the wall, my ears tuned to every creak. My bedroom felt different now. Smaller, the kind of small that makes you feel trapped. I checked the window again, but the backyard was empty. No man, no movement, just the restless trees swaying in the dark. A false alarm, it had to be. I exhaled and sat on the edge of my bed, setting the bat within reach. I'd keep my phone close, try to sleep. Then, thud. A sound from downstairs. My blood turned to ice. Something was inside the house. The sound wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Something shifting downstairs. A chair scraping? A footstep? My grip tightened around the bat, sweat slicking my palms. I strained to hear, barely breathing. The wind rattled the windows, but underneath it, there, a slow, deliberate creak of weight settling on the wooden floor. Someone was inside. I grabbed my phone and typed out 911, but didn't hit call. Not yet. If I made a sound, if I spoke, whoever was down there would know exactly where I was. Another creak. Then, slow, steady. Footsteps on the stairs, no mistaking it now. The rhythmic shift of weight, moving up toward me. Closer. I swallowed, my pulse a frantic drumbeat in my ears. My room had one entrance, no escape. I could lock the door, but if they were already in the house, that wouldn't stop them for long. I needed to act. I moved as silently as I could, pressing my back against the wall beside the door. The bat was heavy in my hands. If they came through, I'd swing. No hesitation, the footsteps reached the landing. Then, they stopped. A long pause, the kind that stretches too thin, too long. My stomach churned, every nerve in my body screaming to move, but I stayed still, barely daring to breathe. A shadow passed under the door. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then the doorknob twisted. The knob twisted once, twice, then stopped. Silence. I gripped the bat so hard my fingers ached. My phone was clutched in my other hand, the screen glowing in the darkness. 911 was still typed out. Then tap, tap, tap. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door. I nearly dropped the bat. My breath hitched in my throat, the way they knocked, like they knew I was standing right there, just inches away. I wanted to scream, wanted to charge through the door, swinging, but I couldn't move. My body had locked up, frozen in place by something deeper than fear. The silence stretched. Then, something changed. The air felt different, wrong. The way it does when you wake up in the middle of the night, certain someone is watching you from the dark. Then, from the other side of the door, a whisper. Not words, just a low, rasping breath that dragged along the wood like it was tasting it. I snapped. I slammed my fist against the call button. 911. The moment the dial tone clicked, the whispering stopped. For a split second, I thought I had imagined it. Maybe I was losing my mind, but then the sound of footsteps moving away, back down the hall, down the stairs, slow and methodical, like they weren't in any rush. I stayed frozen as the dispatcher's voice filled my ear. 911, what's your emergency? I swallowed, struggling to get the words out. Someone was in my house. I heard them. Are you alone in the residence? I hesitated. Yes. I didn't tell them about the whisper, about the way the door had felt wrong. Cops arrived within minutes. They searched the house top to bottom. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No footprints outside. Every door was still locked except for the back door, which was slightly ajar. They found nothing missing, nothing out of place, like no one had been there at all. But I knew what I heard. And later that night, as I lay in bed, staring at my bedroom door, I thought back to that whisper, that voice pressed against the wood. I wasn't sure what scared me more, that someone had been inside my house, or that maybe they still were. I never used to be scared of sleeping alone. I've lived in this house my whole life and nothing ever happened, no weird noises, no eerie feelings, nothing. Just a normal, quiet house. That changed last week. My parents were gone for a business trip, leaving me alone for the first time in years. I was fine with it. I liked having the place to myself. I stayed up late, watched movies, and scrolled my phone until my eyes burned. But I wasn't afraid of darkness. I still am. It was around 2 a.m. when I finally decided to sleep. The house was silent. Too silent. Normally I could hear my parents' TV through the wall, the hum of conversation from their room. Without that, the silence felt heavy. I turned over, pulling the blankets up to my chin. That's when I heard it. A sound, a soft, raspy breath. It was coming from underneath my bed. My body locked up. I held my breath, straining to listen. In, out, in, out. Shallow, uneven, like someone was struggling to breathe just inches below me. I wanted to tell myself it was my imagination, maybe the house settling, or the AC kicking in, but I could feel it, like a faint draft against my legs. Each inhale sent a shiver up my spine. I moved as slowly as I could, reaching for my phone on the nightstand. My fingers barely brushed it before the breathing stopped. The silence was worse. My ears rang with it. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might shake the bed. I stayed frozen, waiting. Then the mattress shifted. Something moved underneath me. I bolted out of bed, slamming the light switch on. My breath hitched as I stared at the empty floor. Nothing. No one was there. But I knew what I heard. And I knew it wasn't over. I barely slept after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I could hear the breathing again, just faint enough to make me doubt myself. By sunrise, I convinced myself I was just overtired. Maybe I'd dreamed the whole thing. I went through my day as normal, trying not to think about it. But the feeling lingered. Like my room wasn't mine anymore, like something had claimed the space beneath my bed. That night, I kept the lights on. I checked under the bed twice, nothing but shadows and dust. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I forced myself to sleep, facing the wall, pulling the blankets tight around me. The room was silent. No breathing, no shifting mattress, just silence. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I groggily reached for it, blinking at the bright screen. Unknown number. My stomach twisted. I almost ignored it, but something in me had to know. I answered. Nothing. Not static, not a voice, just breathing. Slow. Raspy. Familiar. My whole body went cold. I sat up, scanning the room. The closet door was slightly open. Had it been like that before? The breathing on the phone got louder. Closer. I threw the phone down and scrambled for the lamp switch. The bulb flickered, then died. A soft creak came from beneath the bed. My skin prickled. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then the whisper came, "You let me out." I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My heart wouldn't stop racing, and every creak of the house made my skin crawl. I sat on the couch, lights blazing around me, phone in hand, trying to make sense of what had happened. The breathing was still fresh in my mind, the whisper still echoing in my ears. I tried calling my parents, but they were unreachable. I couldn't explain it over a text anyway. Who would believe me? I decided to do something. I had to. I grabbed a flashlight and a broom from the closet. I wasn't sure what I thought I'd find under my bed. Maybe nothing. Maybe the phone call was just a prank. Maybe I had imagined the entire thing. But the thought of it being real, of something being under there, something I couldn't see, gnawed at me. With the flashlight in one hand and the broom in the other, I slowly crawled to my room. I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to face it again. But there was no choice. I stood at the door for a moment, listening. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Finally, I stepped inside, shining the light across the room. The bed, nothing under it. The closet door was still slightly ajar, the same shadows from last night. I bent down, cautiously sliding the broom under the bed, pushing it back and forth, thinking maybe I'd hit something. It seemed like nothing at first, but then the broom hit something. A thud, a soft, unnerving thud. My breath caught in my throat. I knelt closer, shining the flashlight underneath, and there it was. A small, pale hand. My vision blurred for a moment. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, but instead I slowly grabbed the broom, poking at the hand until it moved. The hand was cold, stiff, like it had been there for a long time. And then it curled into a fist. The flashlight flickered. The hand jerked back under the bed like someone pulling it out of sight. I dropped the flashlight. In the pitch black of my room, I couldn't see a thing. I was too scared to move. My legs felt like jelly. I heard a soft scuttling sound. Something was under there, and it wasn't alone. I froze. The sound under the bed, the faint, scuttling shuffle, wasn't just one thing, it was multiple, several bodies scraping against the floor, dragging themselves toward the edge of the bed. My mind screamed at me to leave, to run, but my feet were glued to the floor. I stumbled backward, reaching for the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. I needed to get out. I needed to get away. But I couldn't tear my eyes away from the space under the bed. It was as if I was being pulled in, drawn toward whatever was lurking there. And then the whisper came again. "You let me out." Now you'll let me in." It was closer this time, right behind me. I spun around, my flashlight flickering like a dying star, but the light revealed nothing. I was alone, but I wasn't. The breath, the raspy, uneven breathing was all around me now, not from beneath the bed, but from the corners of the room, from the shadows themselves. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Every direction felt wrong. My chest tightened as the air grew heavy, thick with an oppressive weight I couldn't understand. I had to escape, I had to leave, but as I reached for the door, my hand froze. It was still locked. I hadn't locked it. The click of the door latch was so loud it made my ears ring. I turned the knob slowly, praying it was just my mind playing tricks. When the door swung open, I almost collapsed in relief. But before I could run, I heard a slow, deliberate footstep behind me. I spun around. Nothing. But the air felt thick. It felt like something was pressing against my chest, suffocating me. A low growl came from the darkness, something deep, guttural, full of malice. I ran. I didn't stop to check the house. I didn't care where I was going. I just ran. Down the stairs, out the front door, and into the street. I didn't look back. I called my parents from the sidewalk, and they rushed back early. But by the time they arrived, the house was normal. Everything was exactly as it had been. The bed, the floor, the closet, everything was untouched. But I knew the truth. I knew what I heard. I don't sleep in that room anymore. I don't stay alone in the house. And sometimes when the lights go out, I still hear that breathing. Faint, like it's waiting. And I wonder, if I go back to sleep one night, will it finally come for me? It started innocently enough, like any other move. My parents had been looking for a place for months, and we finally settled on a quiet, secluded house on Willow Street. It was charming, old, but full of character. The kind of house you only see in magazines. The previous owners had left, and the real estate agent assured us it was a perfect place to start over. I didn't think anything of it when we first arrived. I was focused on the excitement of a new beginning. The house was large, with creaking wooden floors and dusty window panes. There were stories about this area, locals talking about the old house that no one could sell. But I didn't care. I was just a teenager looking to escape the city, and this place felt like a dream come true. I spent the first few days unpacking and getting familiar with the place, but something felt off. Every time I went into the kitchen, I felt eyes on me. The creaking of the floorboards seemed to echo more than usual, like someone was walking behind me. The windows would rattle, but I always blamed it on the wind. Then the doorbell rang. It was late in the evening, the kind of hour when everyone should be settled inside. I opened the door, expecting it to be the neighbors introducing themselves, but there was no one there. Just a small piece of paper on the doorstep. I bent down to pick it up, curious. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges, like it had been left there for years. On it, someone had scrawled a single sentence: "Leave before it gets you." I laughed it off. It was probably just a prank, a leftover piece of neighborhood gossip. I tossed the note aside and went back inside, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease. But that night I heard something. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the creaking of the house. It was a voice, soft, almost too quiet to hear. "Leave before it gets you." It came from upstairs, the sound of someone whispering, just out of reach. My heart hammered in my chest. I didn't want to check, didn't want to find the source, but I couldn't help it. I had to know. I climbed the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hallway was dark, the light flickering above me. I walked down to the master bedroom. The door was cracked open. I pushed it open. Nothing. But the air inside the room was thick, like something had been waiting for me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in the house anymore. The whispers were getting louder, and they weren't just at night anymore. It was during the day, too. I'd be sitting in the living room, trying to focus on a book or my phone, and I'd hear something behind me, just a rustle of movement. followed by the same chilling phrase, "Leave before it gets you." I started to see shadows in the corners of my vision, always out of place, never quite right. Sometimes they moved, but when I turned my head, there was nothing there. I told myself it was the house settling, that the old floorboards were just playing tricks on me, but deep down I knew something was wrong. One afternoon, I was alone in the house. My parents were out, and I had decided to explore the attic. The door to the attic had always been locked when we first moved in, but after a few days, I noticed the key was gone. My curiosity got the best of me, and I searched for hours until I found it tucked away under a loose floorboard in the hallway. The moment the door creaked open, I felt the temperature drop. The attic was suffocatingly quiet, the air thick and stale, as if it hadn't been touched in years. I hesitated at the top of the stairs, the wooden planks groaning beneath me as I stepped forward. There were boxes everywhere, old furniture, forgotten things, and in the far corner a small wooden chest. It looked ancient, covered in dust and cobwebs. Something about it felt wrong. As I approached it, I felt that same sensation from the rest of the house. The feeling of being watched, the sense that I wasn't supposed to be there. I couldn't resist. I opened it. Inside, I found nothing but a single framed photograph. It was old, black and white, and showed a family standing in front of the very house I was in. The family looked familiar, but the longer I stared at their faces, the more their eyes seemed to follow me. They were smiling, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Their faces were hollow, gaunt, and the air around them felt wrong. I dropped the photo, feeling the chill wrap around me. That's when I noticed something else in the chest. A journal. The pages were yellowed and worn, but the writing was clear. I flipped it open to the first entry. "We've been told to leave, but we can't. It's here, it's waiting, it won't let us go, it watches us." I felt my stomach drop. I wanted to leave, I needed to leave, but I couldn't stop reading. It whispers, it's always been here, and it wants us to stay. It's hungry. Suddenly I heard it, a soft whisper like breath against my ear. It was right behind me. "Leave before it gets you." I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. Just the same shadows, creeping along the walls. I ran. I locked the attic door behind me and bolted down the stairs. My pulse was racing as I tried to steady my breath. That's when I heard it again, this time louder, clearer, like it was right outside the door. "Leave before it gets you." I couldn't breathe. The air in the house felt thick, like I was suffocating, trapped in something ancient. The whispers were all around me, pressing in, growing louder. I thought I could hear footsteps too, slow, deliberate, almost as if someone was pacing around the house. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to find my parents. But when I reached the front door, I froze. It was locked. I checked the back door. Locked. The windows were sealed tight, just like every other entryway. I ran to the garage, hoping I could get out that way, but even the garage door refused to budge. It was like the house was holding me in, like something didn't want me to leave. I tried calling my parents. The phone rang and rang, but no one picked up. I texted them, begging them to come home, but my messages went unread. Then, the whispering returned, louder than ever. "Leave before it gets you." I slammed my phone down and rushed back inside, trying to escape the suffocating silence. But the house was alive now, vibrating with a terrible energy. The lights flickered as if they were on the brink of failure. The floors creaked as if something was walking through the hallways. I turned to the staircase. That's when I saw it, a figure standing at the top of the stairs, watching me. At first I thought it was my reflection in the mirror at the end of the hallway. The figure was tall, gaunt, and wearing the same clothes as the family in the photograph I'd found. Its eyes were hollow, black voids that seemed to stare straight through me. I could feel my heart stop. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The figure didn't move, but I knew it was watching me, waiting. I turned to run again, but the floor beneath me cracked and the lights went out completely. In the sudden darkness, I heard the voice again, but this time it was more than a whisper. It was a growl, low, guttural, and hungry. "Leave before it gets you!" I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the walls, as if the house was consuming it. I scrambled to the kitchen, where the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long. My eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but there was none. The house felt like it was collapsing around me, its weight bearing down on me from every side. I couldn't take it any longer. I ran to the back door again and pulled at the handle. It opened, slowly, like it was resisting, but I didn't care. I stumbled outside, gasping for air. The yard was cold and barren. The house loomed behind me, silent for a moment, but I knew better than to turn around. The whispering continued, louder than ever, as I ran down the street. "Leave before it gets you!" I didn't stop running until I was miles away, my legs aching, my breath ragged. The chill in the air cut through me like a knife, but I couldn't slow down. I kept hearing it, the whispering, even out here, far from that cursed house. The words followed me like a shadow, a promise of something terrible I couldn't escape. I found a gas station and collapsed in the parking lot, hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath. My mind raced. Was it real? Was I imagining it all? The fear clawed at me, relentless, and I felt that cold, heavy presence still in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was out there, just beyond my sight. The whispers were louder now, unmistakable, and this time I realized they weren't just in my head. They were coming from somewhere around me. I scrambled to my feet and looked around. There was no one except for the clerk inside the station, who looked at me with a strange, almost knowing expression as I hurried inside. "You okay, kid?" the clerk asked, his voice too calm, too familiar. I didn't answer. I grabbed my phone, but there were no new messages. I tried calling my parents again, but their phones were still off. Panic surged through me, making my hands shake. Something was wrong. So wrong. That's when I saw it. The reflection in the window behind the clerk. A pale face watching me from the other side. I whipped around, but the station was empty. I turned back to the window, my heart hammering in my chest. The face was still there, still staring at me, its hollow eyes locked onto mine. It had to be a trick of the light, a reflection, but I could feel its presence, like it was standing right behind me. "Get out!" The voice came from inside my head, sharp and clear, a warning. I ran out of the station, my body moving on its own, desperate to get as far away from the gas station as possible. The whispers were louder now, mingling with the sound of my racing heartbeat. Every step I took felt like I was being pulled towards something dark. I reached my car and slammed the door behind me, locking it, but that feeling of being watched didn't go away. The reflection in the rearview mirror was wrong. The street behind me was empty, except for the figure standing at the end of the block. I drove off, not daring to look back, but I knew deep down it wasn't over. The figure would follow me, and the whispers would never stop. Leave before it gets you. I didn't know what it was or who it was, but I had the sickening feeling that I would never truly escape. It was waiting for me, just like it had waited for all those before me, and no matter how far I ran, it would always find me.